Professor of religion Diana Walsh Pasulka was recently a guest on the Joe Rogan Experience. Now, I did another video earlier in the week about a particular part of that interview. I'll put a link in the description if you want to check that out. But this particular clip I'm going to show you from that interview is Diana talking about, this is going to be crazy, okay? She talks about going to a secret UFO crash site, okay, accompanied by Stanford Professor Garry Nolan. And she's accompanied there by this guy named Tyler, who is, that's not his real name, just a source she uses, someone that works in the Space Force, who she has used for information. And this guy blindfolded them, took them out to this crash site. They retrieved materials that later Garry Nolan studied and deemed not human-made. Now, some of the other materials they recovered are quite interesting. They talk about this like frog skin-like piece of material that was like the size of a notebook, and you could crunch it up, and it would, guess what, go back to its original shape. Just like, if you're familiar with this subject, some of the materials recovered from Roswell. And where is this UFO crash site? In New Mexico. Now, Diana goes on to say there's like 4 crash sites from New Mexico and maybe more, and that this crash happened in the 40s as well. So very interesting. We're going to dive into this. I'm telling y'all, this is nuts. You may have already heard this story from Diana, but the video is still worth watching because she drops other nuggets about other things within it. So this is going to be a great video. It's a little long, but it's going to be worth it, I promise. And if you haven't heard this story, my gosh, you are in for a treat. So sit back and enjoy this wonderful story from Miss Pasulka. Now, if you're new to the channel and you like content like this, hit that subscribe button, y'all. We're trying to get to 10,000 and we're almost there. So please, that would really help out a lot. We put out a new video every day, 12 p.m. Central Standard Time. I do not miss a day. And of course, hit that like button if you can. That really helps out the videos, y'all. So thank y'all so much for the support there, Vetters, for helping out. And of course, comment down below of what you think of this story. There's going to be a lot to comment on, y'all, because there's a lot of like nuggets dropped in here. So curious to hear what everyone says about this. All right, let's jump in, y'all. Enough of me blabbing. Because again, this is kind of a long clip, so let's jump in.
Okay.
So in part, this is before the crash retrieval became a term that the Congress used.
Right.
So I was...
what year are we talking about?
So I started in 2012.
Okay.
By 2015 and 16, I was already in full shock mode of, wow, this is bigger than I thought. And I had been invited to go to a crash retrieval spot in New Mexico that was under a no-fly zone. And I still didn't believe that when UFOs at this point. You have to understand that. So I just thought that the person inviting me is Tyler. He's a scientist. He works for the Space Force. He believes this, and I'm wondering, how does he even believe that this is real? We're going with Garry Nolan, who's from Stanford, and he's out. But at the time, I called him James in my book. And I'm the one actually who invited him to go because I didn't really want to go by myself, you know? And so I insisted that Garry go with me, and Tyler figured out who Garry was, and he said, okay. So we went out there. We had to actually wear blindfolds, and it was out in the middle of this place in New Mexico. I don't know where. I know what was near it, but I don't know where the actual place was. And we were looking for parts, right, that had been put out there. And during the time period, so I think part of it was...
You know, I just thought of this. She should have, like, dropped an air tag out there. You know what I mean? And then come back to find out exactly the location. Like, wouldn't this guy worry about that? Like them giving it away, or that they might bring something that could secure their location, right? Like, again, drop an air tag. Drop something where you can come back. Maybe leave your phone. You leave something there. Maybe buy another phone, right? So you can ping it back. So that seems odd. Seems like a breach of security to do that. Anyway.
The danger was that parts exist, right? So things like this do exist. And there are anomalous materials. This is what I was finding out. And I think that this is what... I'm an okay researcher. It's not like I would make this up, nor would I lie. I'm publishing with Oxford, so my reputation is at stake, right? So I'm doing the best I can to kind of adjudicate, like, am I being fed disinformation or, what's going on? Garry now will be able to identify by taking these parts back and analyzing them through his laboratories, whether or not they're engineered or not. And he's been doing that ever since. So these are the kinds of things that I would have found out. I think part of it was also that I was finding out that there was an oral tradition and that the perception management was very tight. And I think this is what they were afraid. But I've said this now publicly, so. But I did get harassed, though. I did get harassed, and it still happens.
How'd you get harassed?
Most of it is doxing and email harassment at my university began, and both to me and Garry at the same time, and people showing up.
People?
Yeah, people in my town showing up.
Like what kind of people? Schizophrenics?
No, but
No?
but people you wouldn't want to meet. Yeah.
Loons.
Yeah.
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 But you think that's targeted? Do you think that's on
Oh,
purpose?
it's for sure.
But do you think that also that might just be people that are obsessed with this particular subject?
These are people that are affiliated with the people in those
Okay.
Yeah. I mean,
In those what? Is she trying to say programs? That the people in the programs are coming after her? Like, I don't know what she's getting at there. And honestly, that disturbs me to hear that. You know what I mean? That disturbs me to hear that. But I'm curious, like, where is it coming from? Who's paying for that? Because, again, there's people within the program that are testifying, or not testifying, but helping, witnesses, all this stuff. Can they not, like, they don't have any, like, pull within the programs to be like, let's not go after these people? You know what I mean? And where are they finding these people to then convince them to go, like, after these, after someone like Diana? It's very interesting. Like, and again, that's horrible to hear. And I know David Grush has suffered this, right? A lot of people have suffered this sort of retaliation that is odd. It is odd. Who is paying for this?
there's no doubt.
So tell me about the crash retrieval site.
Yeah. So this is so now you have to understand this is a long time period. So I start this in 2012. I get this shock where I'm being, people are asking me to meet, people from these programs and from the Space Force. And I'm actually not meeting with them because I'm waiting. I'm kind of thinking I've got to think this through. It wasn't until about...
Why are they wanting to meet with her? Right. I know she goes on to allude later, like they want to get different academic perspectives on some of this stuff. And again, she's a professor of religion, and she sees ufology as a religion, a new religion that's popped up. And that's why she started studying, got into it, right? But I just find that odd, right? That she's like, people from this program, like how many people? How many programs? Just one program? Just find that interesting. Like, do they all talk together and have these meetings and like, okay, this is who we need to let in, and oh, she seems cool. Let's reach out to her. Let's get this going. And yeah, just curious.
2014 that I actually start to meet the people, like the affiliated people, and they show me some things, and they asked me to go to this crash retrieval site in New Mexico.
No, this is a recent crash?
No, it's okay. So
great question.
This
Joe.
crash is part of a series of crashes that happened in the 1940s.
So the Roswell.
It wasn't Roswell, actually. It was one of the crash sites that's near. It's in New Mexico, but it's not Roswell.
So there was more than one crash in New Mexico.
Yeah, I think they
allegedly.
Allegedly, yeah. They said that there were probably 4. Maybe even more. I don't know.
What a bunch of shitty UFOs keep
I
crashing.
know. That's what. Well, they don't believe that they crashed. They use that term, but they don't think it's a crash. They think that it's. They personally, I'll tell you from a professor's standpoint, like their idea of this is that it's a donation. They call it the donation site. So they think that these were donated materials and they're going to get information, and they do. And
so real quick, a few things here. One, like, why do they keep calling it crash sites then? Call it something else, right? If wording and verbiage is so important, because that implies that, right? Why don't they call it donation site? Why don't they call it something else? And why would UFOs donate something like that? It seems so odd to donate, right? Like that particular way, dropping little stuff or crashing, right? You let the vehicle just hit the ground and scatter into a bunch of pieces and then let these people get it. That's like when you go to donate at Goodwill, do you just drive by and like fucking toss the goddamn TV out the window and it just breaks right there by the door and they're like, okay, thanks for the donation. What can you do with it? Nothing. It's broken. It just seems like an odd way to donate. I mean, even we have proper ways out of airplanes that we donate with parachutes and it flies down safely. And, you know, if you're going to do donations like that, I don't know. It just seems like an odd word to use, donation as well. More like they left clues for us, right? Potentially. I don't know. And maybe it's not even a big deal to call it that. But that is interesting that that's their theory, right? Because are they having the same assumption we are as that, well, they're too advanced. Like, why would they crash? So it must be a donation. Is that where it is? Or what other evidence do they have that makes them think they're donations other than just the pieces they're finding, right? Like, what other than that? Because why wouldn't you just think it's a crash, right? So that's just interesting. I don't know.
And that's how Tyler was able to create a lot of the things that he created through, and he would fly these on the space shuttle, by the way, these experiments and so forth. It was very, very fascinating to me. I mean, I think anybody would be fascinated with it, to tell you the truth.
When you say fly these, you don't mean physical materials.
So he would have an idea that he would get through these protocols that I told you about. So he practices these protocols, and it would be related to something that he would then want to fly on the space shuttle, because this was during the time the space shuttle was happening. And the space shuttle had anti-gravity environments. And
So what does that mean, space shuttle? I'm so confused by this.
He needed these environments in order to create this. And now this is actually a whole field called biologics. So there's a real field now where people are doing these experiments in space and creating things that we can't create here.
Like what?
Medicine, certain types of metals.
So she's basically implying that going up into zero gravity, creating something new in zero gravity, bringing it back down to Earth, that then becomes categorized as a biologic. Even metals. Now, the reason I'm thinking about that is because that's what David Grush keeps saying. We have biologics. We have biologics. We have like, is that what David Grush is talking about? I hope that's not what he's talking about. Like this guy in particular going up to the space shuttle, messing with metals and coming back down and being like, this is our ET proof. That seems odd. Right? Because I think David Grush has said bodies before. I'm going to put a link in the description to a video where I believe he says bodies. And it's his backup interview he did with Ross Coulthart and Bryce Zabel. So backup interview being, it's on my shorts, on Vetted Shorts. I've only done a couple, but one of them is that. It's an interview that Ross Coulthart and Bryce Zabel did right before the News Nation interview. Right, because they were a little worried that, maybe News Nation won't air it. You know, they're going to own the interview. So Ross and Bryce wanted to have their own interview with David Grush that they filmed at Bryce's house with his son. He brought over a camera. They just filmed him up against a wall, and got it. And I believe in there he says bodies. So, but either way, I hope it's not this biologics thing. Because when I hear biologics, I think biological. Living, right? So that's interesting. I don't know. What do y'all think? Tell me in the comments. I'm curious what y'all are going to say about that.
kind of like ceramic metals. He created something. I actually wrote about this and published about it. Totally academic paper. So, most general readers would never read it. It's because it has academic jargon in it.
Mm-hmm.
But I talked all about it.
Jamie's got something here. Researchers have capitalized on microgravity in space to accelerate drug discovery and development. That was one of the speculations about the type of metals that were retrieved supposedly from these crash sites, that these whatever these metals were, they were layered, and that they could only be layered specifically the way they were done in a zero gravity environment.
Yeah, that's right. They were engineered. So
Right.
I actually did talk to Gary before I came on your podcast, because I just wanted to be sure, because I don't want to represent his research incorrectly.
Right.
So I said, can you please, recap it? He always thinks I'm an idiot too. He's like, how many times have I told you this? So, yeah, so he has parts from various of the crash sites that are clearly engineered. Not by humans.
Right.
But he doesn't. He's not going to jump to the conclusion that it's extraterrestrial. He says we just don't know.
Right. It's just something that is outside of the realm of our current understanding of how we create physical materials.
That's correct.
And how much of this stuff do they have? Do they have full crafts?
I've never seen any full crafts.
What did you see when you went to the crash site?
So I saw two types of materials. One I can say looks like kind of metallic frog skin, and another.
And this is on the ground at the crash site,
okay,
or do they
so
have it in
that's another
warehouses?
thing. I have to tell you a little bit about how we came about this. Now, remember, this is the first book that I wrote about this, so I've written 2 books about it, and I wasn't a believer. So when I went there, I even wasn't a believer. I was like, I think they're trying to give me misinfo, or
Right.
something's going on.
Right.
Maybe they really believe this. Well, they both really believed this. I know that for sure. So we're there, and we had to wear blindfolds in order to go, me and Gary. So Tyler's taking us. We drive to a certain place. He says, put the blindfolds on. We had to leave our cell phones. We couldn't take any technology with us. And so we go out. It takes about an hour to get out to the site.
I'm telling y'all, I would have taken an air tag, dropped that mother effer right somewhere, and gone back. Or not. Maybe that's a risky move. I don't know. I wonder if it's a patrolled area. Again, they said it's over a no-fly zone. And New Mexico has a ton of just open. I've been out to Area 51, I've been out to Vegas, and then drove out to Area 51 and drove all the way around it, actually. It's just desert, y'all. I mean, just like for hours. Dude, you're just driving around and there's nothing. And to be honest with you, oddly enough, I'm not joking, when I was there, I remember people at the Alien, okay, that's a famous like hotel by Area 51, by one of the entrances, the main entrance that everyone uses, like, to go. People there, and this little like convenience store that was right there. There's only one little area there in town. They were telling me that it's all owned by the Chinese. All that area around Area 51, like that's public land or whatever, it's owned by the Chinese. Just thousands of square miles owned by the Chinese. Why would we let the Chinese have all that property out there? It's so weird, right? If that's like where we're testing stuff out there, and then the Chinese have land that they could be setting up stuff around there. I mean, that just seems so odd, doesn't it? Why would we let the Chinese? I'm talking the other side of the highway. So this is like, it's called extraterrestrial highway. And on one side, you got where Area 51 is, some mountains and stuff, on one side, right? And then on the other side of the street, literally, is owned by the Chinese. That is odd. Because I remember the lady at the convenience store in Rachel, it's called Rachel, Nevada. She was like, "Oh, you guys should go check out these mines." I was with my cousin. She was like, "Oh, you guys should go check out these mines down the road. You can go, walk around them and stuff." So this is like, yeah, it's all owned by Chinese. She's like, "Oh, Chinese own all of this around here." Like, but you're free to go on the land and start walk around like people do that. I was like, okay. So I don't know. It just seemed odd to me. So again, I would have dropped an air tag.
We're blindfolded. We get out to the site. We get out. We were wearing like I guess there's rattlesnakes out there, and so we have to wear certain boots and things like that. So we get out. We take our blindfolds off. And the first thing I do is I look around because it looks really familiar to me, even though I've never been out there. And Tyler looked at me and he said, "Looks familiar, doesn't it?" And I said, yeah. And he said, it's you've seen it in the X-Files. And I was like, what? He goes, they had an insider on their team. And I honestly thought, okay.
I'm sorry, what? Wait, what? So we're saying that an insider in the UFO crash retrieval program worked with the X-Files and then told them of a real site they could go film at? That seems so odd. Right? And how would Diana recognize it? Like, oh, I recognize this. She's a huge X-Files fan. Like, I love the X-Files. Hello? Right? I don't remember. How are you just going to remember some place of an episode? You know what I'm saying? Like, that sounds so random. Nothing against Diana. I like Diana. I'm just saying that's an odd thing to have. Like, oh, I recognize this. You recognize it from a TV show 30 years ago for some random episode? That seems odd to me. But they really showed that crash site in an X-Files episode? Y'all, get on it. Like, vetters, get on this. Let's start scrubbing every damn X-Files episode to find some sort of crash site or something. Start there. Maybe they used it. Maybe they used the location not for a crash site, but for something else. I don't know, but let's get on it. Where is this place? I mean, that's easily... if enough people on the internet got on that, they'd find that. Have y'all seen that stuff on like Reddit or something or TikTok? I don't even know where they do it. Where someone will be like, put a video up of like, I saw this one. It's a great example of this guy works at a fast food place and he has these, they're called third pans. If you work in restaurants, you know what I'm talking about. Basically like containers, and they got all this lettuce in them. And he's standing on it like, hey, I'm about to serve this, right? But you only see his feet. I mean, you barely see anything in the video, And dude, they found that guy within like an hour. The internet found that guy in an hour. I'm just telling you, like, if we really wanted to find, you go scrub through the X-Files episodes and find this, And they said they had an insider on their team, so it must have been the older episodes. I doubt it's some of the new seasons that came out. Does that make sense? I doubt that. Now, I always heard that John Ramirez, who's an ex-FBI guy, he's gone on like Redacted and other stuff, whatever. He's always said that he influenced that show and he worked with that show, and he, Fox Mulder's kind of based on him. Anyway, I'm just saying, would he not have known about this insider? Was he the insider? This is interesting, y'all.
This actually fits into my research that, we learn everything we do about religion from media. Like, you want to know what, Moses looked like, you just watch, the Ten Commandments and things like that. Like, it's not true, of course, but that's how most people learn about their religions. And so this made me understand this is what's going on. It's like people are believing this through this, and then I'm coming to this, and I'm going to confirm that it indeed looks like this, and it is a crash site. It's just too weird for me, but this is what I study, so I'm going to study. But that gets to your point, like, how did we get this stuff? So he actually did have metal detectors that were configured for specific types of metals that he had these built.
Is there a scientific term for these particular types of metals?
They're called metamaterials.
Metamaterials.
Yeah.
Why?
I think.
How would he know what to go look for? It doesn't make sense. Like, metamaterial. Like, how would he, like, how do you even set up a metal detector? Anyway, I don't know.
I think that's just a fancy word for saying we don't know what this is.
Mm-hmm.
Frankly, because they're meta.
Okay.
Right?
And they're layered in some sort of a way where it's like literally like atom upon atom.
Yeah. Well, I don't actually know the science of it. I just know what these guys tell me because, they're doing the research at, their laboratories.
People are very cagey about it. Like Jacques Vallée was very cagey about the way he was willing to describe it and the way he was willing to describe these things. It's almost like they don't want to blurt out too much because it'll cut off access.
Okay, so that could be. But I know that the reason that I don't want to is there's some type of national security issue, and I am an American.
Right.
So there's something like that going on.
Right. Especially if someone else can figure out how to use these things.
Yeah.
So when you go to this site, do you see the physical ground where this...
So I want to hear all this, but again, China owns all that land in New Mexico, like a lot of land in New Mexico. So national security, I'm an American. I feel like she's been told that line because she says it several times in the podcast and it seems off about her. Not to say, look, I'm a patriot, I'm American too, right? But it just, the way she says it, it seems like that's what, not that she was told to say that, but like she's had that repeated to her. And so she's come to that understanding, which again is totally valid. There's a lot of validity with this national security issue, right? As much as we want all the information, there is validity to some of this national security, that issue. I mean, let's be real.
Hit?
Okay, yes. So
and what does it look like?
Okay, so
Let me go
at
back.
this, something like
Go
that
back
going
here.
on.
Right. Especially if someone else can figure out how to use these things.
Yeah.
So when you go to this site, do you see the physical ground where this thing hit?
Okay, yes. So
And what does it look like?
Okay, so at this point, the whole site is covered with rubble that looks like rusted rubble, and it's not sand. So there's the sand of the desert, right? And then there's this rubble everywhere. And I'm stepping on the rubble and I'm kind of looking at it. And
How big are these pieces?
Well, this is all just like less
Gravel?
than yeah, it's like gravel. It's like, and so I asked Tyler, "What's this?" And he said that after the government retrieved the crash and they didn't want anyone out here looking, so what they did was they dropped a bunch of tin cans out here in the 1950s, and these have disintegrated down into this rubble. And so I put that in my book because that's what he said. And when I put that in my book, the editor of my book said to me, "You can't say this because it's ridiculous."
You're telling me that our government, to cover up one of the greatest secrets in the history of mankind, their solution was to drop tin cans on the ground as a distraction, a diversion, in the hopes that over the next 10 years they would just rust and disintegrate. Like, what? So, like, how long were those tin cans just out there? Like, how many? Like, what are we talking about? This sounds crazy, y'all. That sounds really weird. That just sounds so weird. They just went and got a bunch of tin cans, empty ones. This sounds so weird. Like, why would you put your, like, anyone going out there is going to be like, what the hell's all these brand new tin cans that are just laying out here, a whole sea of them? Because they're saying it's a huge site. I mean, a crash site is going to be huge. Look at the debris of any plane or something that fall, like, it's massive. So the idea that you put all these tin cans, I mean, you would have had to have put like tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of cans out there. Sounds so odd. Like, again, to cover up the greatest secret in the history of mankind, you're going to throw out some tin cans. I guess that's what they had left over from catering.
And at the time, I was like, it is ridiculous, but this is what happened, and it's data. And even though we don't understand it now, and it seems ridiculous, we need to keep it in there.
It doesn't seem ridiculous to me at all.
Well, this is a person who absolutely, the editor, who absolutely doesn't believe in UFOs at all, but knows that I'm doing good work on a new type of religion, therefore is keeping the Oxford brand, Oxford University, straight and narrow. But I convinced her. I said, it's data, so we've got to keep it in there. And I'm really happy I did. I kept it in there. I kept a lot of stuff in there that didn't make sense to me at the time. But when I look back on it with everything that's coming out now, I'm like, okay, I'm glad I did that.
Well, the strategy for disseminating disinformation along with real information is long been used.
Yes.
Where they'll say a bunch of really ridiculous things and connect them to something that's probably real.
Right.
And that way everything gets thrown out. It's the baby with the bathwater. The whole thing gets thrown out.
Totally.
And if you have a site where they've picked up these anomalous metals that defy our understanding of metallurgy, and you're calling them metamaterials, and no one knows where the hell it comes from, what's the best way to confuse people? Well, just throw a bunch of regular metal everywhere.
That's right. That's exactly.
Joe thinks that's the best strategy? Throw some tin cans out there? Would you not be like, man, what the hell's going on? Why are there so many tin cans out here? That would make you want to go to that site and check that area out, because that would just look out of place. Like, if you go out in the desert, there's not just like piles of metal. I live in Texas, y'all. I've been on lots of deserts. I've been out to that New Mexican desert. It would be odd to just run up on all this metal in tin cans. I mean, that just would be odd. Unless it's in a place that's like occupied. Man, I really want to watch every X-Files episode now, find out where this place is.
Exactly.
Yeah, just throw tin cans.
But we were out there all day. So we were out there for probably 10 hours. And I know, so at many points in the day, Gary and I would go aside and kind of confer without Tyler listening and saying, it's, is this a setup, And so he goes, well, let's just try to find some stuff and I'll analyze it and I'll tell we'll tell you.
So are you...
Would they not be monitored the entire time? They're at this secret crash retrieval. Would they not be monitored with video and audio this entire time? You know what I mean? This just seems so odd to go on this like field trip with lunches and, you know what I mean, a nice Riesling out there. It's like, it's just so strange to me. But if there really was a crash site, right, and they go out, I mean, how else do you do it? So I guess, there is some sort of like logistical, like practical way of doing this, right? I mean, I don't know. Just some of this seems odd. But again, I love Diana. I love her storytelling. I love her story. And I am fascinated by this. And look, if they're bringing materials back that are exciting, what more do we want? That's evidence to further investigate, right? So on the flip side of that, right, like it's better. What else do we have? So, you're going to a supposed crash site, you're getting things to study. That's what we're supposed to do. So, I mean, to be fair, they are doing exactly what we would hope they would do.
Do you notice that the ground has been disturbed? Is there an indication that something hit there?
Yes. So Tyler took us and showed us.
Okay, hang on.
It's everywhere. Like, he's been a part of.
So you can tell that something has hit the ground there, and you thought some tin cans would help. You wouldn't see that anymore, right? Like, why wouldn't you cover that part up rather than, you know what I'm saying? Like, why wouldn't that be? Again, this is just such a strange strategy from our government, if that's true.
Of this retrieval site for like 40 years or so. And he knows the people that, like the original people and the story and everything like that. So he gave us a tour of the whole place. And we found parts, by the way, and some of the parts were so deep down into the ground, like there were rocks and things like that. And Gary, I'm afraid he's going to get bit by a rattlesnake, frankly. He's putting his hand down there and, spending like hours at this one place trying to get something. He found some things there. And I thought, if people are trying to fool us and put things down, they did a really good job, because they would have had to come here like a year ago or something and put that down there. So
how does Gary know to check there? The metal detector? Metal detector's like just barely above the surface. You know, like barely under the surface, I mean. It's like, how does Gary know to this one particular spot to really dig in and get this stuff really underground?
So I don't, honestly, that's my personal opinion, is I don't think that this was put out there for us. They did find. We did find things. What's interesting to me is this, is that after we found these things and we did all this kind of data collection and everything at the site, you know, very much like anthropologists do, by the way, you know, documenting what we found, when we found it, you know, what it looked like and things like that, and putting into special containers.
If this is an actual UFO crash site, wouldn't Tyler, who's running this crash site now, like he's taking it over like a, you know, a B&B, some sort of bed and breakfast, you know, so he's just going to let these people collect like out of this world data, out of this world materials, like, again, changing fundamentally our reality. They're not experts in this sort of stuff, right? So like letting them touch the material and get the materials out like that, does that not seem reckless of us if this is true? And wouldn't these materials have already been collected that they could just transfer to them? Like, how has this crash site not been pulled of all the materials? You know, completely just, you know what I mean? Everything taken out of the ground. I don't understand that. Like, they're literally, for police investigations, they'll take chunks of the ground out and transport them and check stuff. So that program, crash retrieval program, couldn't take like chunks of the ground out and bring dirt in and fill it in. I'm just saying, right? To really study it. I mean, if they have the capability to, you know, be anywhere in the world at a moment's notice to retrieve a craft and secretly take it back to wherever their base is and not get caught, they don't have the capabilities to, like, you know what I'm saying, excavate and get some stuff out. What, like, I don't know. It just seems so odd that the site is treated like a public dinosaur, you know, rock. Where you know, you ever been? They have a place like that in Texas where you can go see dinosaur footprints in the ground. You can even try to brush and find something yourself there. You know, that kind of stuff. Like, seems like something just, you know, odd like that. I don't know. Again, if this is an actual extraterrestrial craft that has been donated and it's spread apart all over the ground, like just letting people come and just, well, we hope they know how to collect this data and this stuff. And what are the effects of touching it? What if there's some sort of biological effect to touching that material that you don't know about, if it's from out of this world, right? Was there any sort of like test given, you know, any sort of like speech given to her, right? Some sort of safety speech, right? Like when you go skydiving, right? You got to get a little training. Was there any sort of training? I mean, think about that. You have to have training to go fly out of a parachute, but you don't need any training to show up to a UFO crash site, apparently. Again, it's just, that seems odd to me a little bit. I don't know, man. It's a little odd that there wouldn't be some sort of like, hey, just be careful, you know, let's get you in a suit. We don't want anything to happen to you. You know, touching these materials, we don't know what implications. We've studied them not at all. You know, don't touch it with your skin. Don't look at it directly. You know, don't let it heat up to a certain temperature. I don't know. Don't mix it with this. You know, what if Diana has allergies? Right? Like, I don't know. I'm just saying. I don't know.
Then I was like, I don't want this. I don't want any of this stuff. And they both looked at me and laughed. And so Tyler told us what was going to happen when we went back to the airport. He said, once we get back to the airport, Gary said he's going to take the stuff. Gary's going to get stopped. Oh, Tyler can go through airports, by the way. He doesn't have to go through the normal thing that I have to go through, like the TSA and everything. He just goes through. So he went through that. I had to go through. Gary went through, and he did get stopped. And everything that happened exactly as Tyler said it would. There was going to, they were going to look through everything. They were going to like take everything apart. Then, all that was a signal to someone in DC that somebody had these parts, and this is who. That's what he said was so. And I don't know if the signal went to DC, but everything else happened. And Gary and
What? Why wouldn't the guy just take it through? He's not getting stopped. Did Gary know, like, I'm going to be now on a watch list or something and people are going to know I have these materials? Did he sign up for that? No wonder she said, I don't want this stuff. That's what I would have said. Hell no. I don't want this stuff. I don't know what this stuff is, man. This just seems so odd to have this, like, studied like this.
Gary and I were both sweating, right? We were like, oh.
So they essentially allow this.
Yeah.
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 Is it because they want different perspectives from different academics?
I think so. My personal opinion is that, and in fact, there was a conference at Stanford like a month ago, and I was at.
She's talking about the Soul Foundation conference, I would imagine. I don't know for sure, but she was at it. It was about a month ago.
At that conference. And part of what was said was that this is information that we can't keep siloed because it's too important, and we need to have the best minds on this information, this data, this material. And so
nothing against her, but is she considered one of the great minds? Garry Nolan is very well respected in his field. I don't know. I'm just asking questions. Like, that does make sense, right? When you put it that way, like, well, they want to just get different people to look at it and get their take on it. I mean, that makes sense. But what would make more sense is that you would already have the materials in some sort of secret place. You invite these people to that place, and they can look at it in a controlled area, right? Like evidence. That's how they view evidence, right? At police stations, I believe, right? You got to get in a plate, right? I mean, you're being watched the whole time while you're looking at this stuff. I mean, were they watching them so closely that they don't know that they just pocketed something for something later? You know what I mean? Or again, I just think there'd be a better way to have different people study this. This seems like an odd way to have people look into this.
So they're kind of like outsourcing.
How big were these pieces?
So these pieces that I found weren't very big. I mean, they were one of them was about like this big, right?
Okay, like so the size of a pack of gum?
Yeah. And the actual frog skin type thing was probably about this big.
Like a small notebook?
And we found a couple of those.
Mm-hmm. You found a couple of those just wandering around this area?
Well, we weren't wandering. We were actually digging in and looking. And yeah.
Wandering's a bad word.
That's
but
okay.
Exploring.
Yeah.
This frog skin, what is it? Is it malleable? Is it?
Yes, it's malleable. And you could crunch it up and it'll go back to its original form.
I've heard of that before. That was something that they talked about at Roswell, that there was some bizarre metal that you could crumple up like a piece of paper and it would flatten right back out.
Yeah. So there we go, y'all. Again, I'll put a link in the description. Y'all go check it out. There's more to that interview. Again, very odd. But if they do have that piece of frog skin that you can crump malleable, but I mean, that's super interesting. That's for sure. I would love to see that. Why can't we see that? If Garry Nolan has that, why can't we see that? You know what I mean? I don't know if it's known that Garry Nolan is in possession of that. Because remember, she said she didn't take any with her. Garry Nolan took it all. Again, why hasn't this place been excavated to the T? It's almost been 100 years. Right? It just seems so odd. After all this time, it had everything, there's still these pieces in there. Very odd. I don't know. What do y'all think about this story? I definitely find a lot of it super fascinating. And again, I'm just asking questions, y'all. I'm not saying I don't believe Diana. I do believe her. Absolutely, I believe her. Of course, I don't think that story is made up. I'm just asking questions. I just, some of that's odd. Maybe there's totally reasonable answers for all of that. I'd be curious to ask her. What she, some of that stuff. If I ever did an interview with her, that's what I would do. The whole thing would be just on this visit to this crash site. That's it. I would just have a bunch of questions about that. Yeah, so can't wait to read the comments. Curious what y'all are going to say about all these different things. So, yeah. All right, guys. We'll see you guys tomorrow. Remember, a new video every day, 12 p.m. Central Standard Time. Don't forget to hit the like button on the way out if you haven't already. Remember, y'all, every day's a gift. We'll see you tomorrow, Vetters. Peace.